Hello, all, and welcome to History with R&R Live. We're a little bit late today, but that's okay. How are you doing, Jeff?
Well, I'm doing fine. How's Robert today?
Oh, I'm all right. Other than snow, we're good. All right, so I can
Send
only
some
go
of it
back
my
to.
way.
I wish. I'd send it all your way. so,
I don't know about all
uh,
of it. You can keep some of it.
yeah. Apparently, there was some conversations before, but this stupid YouTube won't let me go back so far. So, DK Dan, Professor Brainy Specs, Mrs. Canuck, welcome, my love. Thomas Potts. John DeMarco, and that's it for now. All right, welcome all, and welcoming our special guest today. We're gonna invite Chris Knight and ignore the ego. How are you doing?
Welcome, Chris.
Sunglasses are off. He's locked up over there in that cage, and hopefully the captives will stay quiet over here.
Yeah, that's
I
annoying.
closed the bagel shop early today.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard that I opened up a bagel shop. My captives are the ones that sit there and they run it. Normally open till 5, but today we've closed it early because I didn't want the ruckus. So they're back in their handcuffs, their chains, and their gags are in.
Wow.
So hopefully that keeps them quiet.
Yeah. And you make sure you make your bagels full Russian special. You add some paper to it instead of actual flour. Got to keep those costs down.
I cut the ingredients every time.
Yeah.
Water, lots of water.
Yeah. And yes, Mrs. Canuck, at midnight when I'm setting up a stream, sometimes I misspell things. It was supposed to be guest, and I put quest because I'm an idiot, but that's okay.
I don't know. I like the
Things
quest
things I
bit.
do at midnight. Uh, ugh, why? All right, so reining myself in here. So here is here's an interesting topic, one that gets shied away from because it's not a glory spot. It's not a we won, we kicked ass. This is a topic that gets kind of pushed under the rug. Not only that, but there's a
Quite a
lot of
bit.
stuff that's come out since and during, for that matter, that necessarily wasn't true and not exactly accurate. And some of the things that happened during this particular engagement, we're still feeling the effects of, and that would be Vietnam. And Chris, I'll let you start us off, and we'll just kind of go in where we can.
Well, I would like to first preface here that what you hear from me today, I cannot corroborate. I cannot give you proof on. All I can say is that it is from direct knowledge that I get this information from because my grandfather was a lieutenant colonel in the Army during Vietnam, actually, right before Vietnam really took off in, let's say, 66 or so. Um, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel and he was shipped or reassigned to Fort Riley, Kansas, which is home of the Big Red One. The Big Red Run has been around since I don't think it was Civil War, but it was soon after the Civil War. Custer from Last Stand of Custer, he had been stationed there. So it's in the United States. It's one of the biggest Army regiments in the country, if not the biggest. And I'd have to double check on that. But he was reassigned to Fort Riley, Kansas in 1963, I believe. And to give you a little background on my grandfather, he had gone to officer school. He had been in World War II. He had been a part of Korea. He actually grew himself in the military. My mom talks about how they lived in Okinawa, how lots of times he'd be gone. My aunt was actually born in a castle in Italy. These are the places they got to stay because of where my grandfather was shipped to and stuff. But he went to officer school at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, which is another historic fort in Kansas. But he went to officer school there, and one of the things that they had them do, I think, for let's say a final project, was to create a military deployment plan. And so, some many years later, he's at Fort Riley, Kansas, and he had told my mother and my aunts and my uncle about they were all in the officers' mess hall one day, and literally every one of the top brass was called out immediately, and within 24 hours had left the base. There was something going on. My grandfather knew it, didn't have any clue. He was not told about anything about it. But several weeks later, he receives orders that he needs to ship out X number of troops to a certain spot. And this was not yet going to Vietnam, but they were shipping them overseas. And after about 3 or 4 of these orders, he ends up going to my grandmother and professing, he's like, we're going to war, and I don't really know where, but I believe it's Vietnam. And she asked, well, how do you know this? And he said, they are using my deployment plan to deploy troops overseas, and they think I don't recognize it because they were doing it in little bits and pieces. And as time went on, in 1960, I want to say 65, I'm looking here to make sure that I got this right. But yeah, well, we were there in 1955, but the actual fighting that we were in started in 1965, I believe. Like the main fighting that we got into was 65. And basically, he helped send the troops out to this. And I find it amazing because this is stuff that even the government didn't acknowledge. The government never acknowledged that Vietnam was a war. It was not sanctioned by Congress. It was considered police action. We kind of did what we did in Afghanistan for a long time. We're just going to send people out there. We're going to get their troops or their people ready to fight off this, what was later on called the Viet Cong, to protect their land. And this is, again, you know, I don't like to go into this, but if you know anything about the United States government and its military, we lots of times use we're the white knight as a way in for one of very different reasons. It depends. There was a lot of textile implications, like better factories that they could make stuff a lot cheaper. And there was a lot of reasons why we wouldn't be there. But we, as usual, hide under the guise of we're going to protect people from, at that time, it was communism. Because communism, we were still under the idea that if one country falls, the next country falls, the next country falls. Truthfully, what we've ended up with is China keeps these two countries going. North Korea and, of course, Vietnam. 90% of it is still to this day controlled and aided by China. But so he started sending out troops to there, and I think that it's an interesting fact of everything that you hear from him that it's a deployment plan. Anytime a military action happens, you use deployment plans, but the fact that they were actually sending a large volume from this regiment, the Big Red One, it speaks volumes as to the United States' actual plan, because in 1968, I believe, I want to say, 1968 was the Tet Offensive. And so the biggest bulk of what he sent over was in 1968. And and that was for the Tet Offensive. Of course, Tet Offensive was like I want to say, it was like February. It was like 2 months almost of constant shelling, if I remember right. I don't have the actual dates in front of me, but I have insight on that also because my father actually was in the Tet Offensive on the USS Providence as a radio operator for that. But we shelled constantly for literally 24 hours nonstop. The Citadel wall was one of the things that they were trying to basically go through the defense that the Viet Cong fighters, and pretty much what we know these days, now is that it was a lot of Chinese troops who were sent to help these guerrilla warfare people. They had better weapons than that we knew, and all of that. But I think, like I said, knowing when we actually made that decision, because like I said, in 1955, we were trying to protect places that could fall to communism or had communistic values in them to try to stop it from happening. It was the U.S.'s mission to not let communism spread like a plague across the country, across the world. You had Russia,
Right.
China, Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, Spain still had some tinges of it. Italy, I think, had some. Parts of Africa had things. Basically, if you think about it, everything after World War II, when it got split, if it was East Berlin or West Berlin, that told you whoever helped back that side was pretty much going to be considered communist. Whether or not they actually blatantly called themselves communist, if you had ties with Russia or China, you were pretty much labeled as a country that the United States was concerned could fall to communism. And lots of them were, I don't want to call third world countries, but they were countries that just didn't, they had tyrannical governments, people who weren't concerned about their citizens. And the United States, of course, would send troops in or close to these countries, not much different than how we were doing the Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kuwait and all that. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing we did there. There's a problem in this area. The problem is, whatever religious, religious sects who want to come after the United States or come after free countries, enslave people. It was the same thing with communism. We viewed it the same way. It was something we had to get involved in. So, again, it's really interesting that leading up from 55 to like 63, 64, 65, that it took 10 years. And then we pretty much were trying to say we're done. And that's when this Tet Offensive happened, like I said, in 1968. That was the United States way of trying to say we're going to end this war.
Yeah.
And let me look really quick to make sure I have the time periods right. There, 1968. So it was almost a full month. It was, and yeah, and so we tried to basically rid the Viet Cong and get them out of Vietnam. And even after the 26 days, they raised their flag again and still were there. And that was basically the beginning of the end of our ability to protect that country, because until 1975, 7 years went by still. And the whole time, we did everything from Agent Orange to, I'm trying to think of the name of the bombs, the
Rolling Thunder and
all that, napalm. That's what I'm thinking of. The
napalm bombs. Oh yes.
They literally torched that whole country. And what we learned after the fact, and now when we go back, of course, it's amazing now that the way it's changed is they love us there. They want us there and all that, even though they're still a communist country. It's like they have. I guess maybe it's because they kind of realize that we bring money, and even though they're still communists, they kind of have one up on us, because it is in essence, even though it was not a war, it is literally the only war or action such as that you could literally say that we never had control of.
Yeah.
No.
We were behind the whole time. And like I said, after we left, and now that we send people back, we learned that these people had hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels. My father talks about when he volunteered to go online, my father talked about people would show up. You'd hear, people firing at you from this side, and then like 2 minutes later, it'd be over here, and you didn't know. And literally, these people would travel in small packs of 10 and be able to jump back and forth through these different tunnels to make you think you were facing 50, 60, 70, 80 and they were able to do it. So then what the United States government started doing and the military started doing was literally taking grenades, small explosives and stuff like that, and throwing them in these tunnels and trying to collapse them and stuff. And I mean, they were constantly guessing the whole time.
Yeah.
They didn't know. And I think I said it before. My father talks about walking through villages where you didn't know if a kid came up to you, if they were trying to kill you. I mean, I think
that's a scary thought.
In Apocalypse Now, I think you even see it where they kill a village off. I think it's in Apocalypse Now. It's in some movie where they go through and they literally just mow down a whole village. That did happen.
Yeah.
The United States government and the military leaders didn't really know how to fight this. So when we started hearing about women and children literally bombing our troops, they decided at times it was easier and safer for them to go in and destroy city or towns and stuff.
Forget it.
And I think that's why we don't like to look back on the Vietnam.
No, because at certain points, I mean, it was kill them all, let God sort them out. And that was the mentality, because doing it the other way was too risky. I do have a question. Did they ever talk about what they thought of the quote unquote rules of engagement, where they had rules and the enemy didn't, which is a big talking point for Vietnam, because they could only go so far, and then they weren't allowed to go anymore.
Well, hold on, I'm looking up something here real quick. The biggest problem we had with Vietnam was that the United States government and most militaries follow a pretty basic line of thinking. If you get caught, that's it. You give up, you walk away, and it goes to the Geneva Accord and all that stuff. Then, we have to give you food and water, which everybody knows is it's a sore subject on every side, because how much are you required to give and how often are you required to give, and those types of things. Right. Basically, keeping somebody barely alive is considered enough, I guess. Viet Cong was not about that. The Viet Cong was like double what the Japanese were in World War II. The Japanese literally, the Emperor of Japan had every man, woman, and child believing that if they didn't win that war, the end of Japan was going to come. Literally, that the United States and the Allies were going to come in and literally bomb the place down to nothing.
Yeah.
They scared the people into believing that. So these people, kamikaze pilots, people, we hear about it, or we've heard about it, World War II, there are not very many people left. But there's talk about people coming at them with samurai swords, throwing rocks until they were caught. I mean, literally anything they could.
Jumping
so that
off
was
probably,
cliffs. Yes. I mean, all this stuff. Because that was honorable. It was honorable death if you jumped and just killed yourself. I mean, lots of times, like kamikaze pilots, if you jumped off a cliff and you hurt somebody in the United States military, you were doing the most you could. So we take this idea of honor and stuff, and and what you get in Vietnam is the next level, which is this. There is no die. It's just go, go, go. And use all these warfare things that we never thought about. It was almost tribal what we were facing. Again, these people would hide and they would wait for our whole units to go forward. They would wait for units to pass by. They wouldn't attack the unit up front. They would wait and then attack them from behind. And again, my father was he was a communications person on the USS Providence. When it became time for them to line up everybody, because people were dying left and right, lots of death, unfortunately, they lined up everybody on his boat and said, "Hey, who wants to volunteer to go on land?" And my dad, bored is what he told me. He was bored of being behind, in a seat listening and relaying messages all the time. So he volunteered to go on land as a radio operator. And there were two people who had the shortest life expectancy in the United States military on land in Vietnam, and that was whoever was in command and your radio operator. Because the first two things the Viet Cong would try to do is take out your commander and take out your radio operator, because if they did that, then panic ensued because you had no leadership and you had no way to contact anybody to come in and drop bombs or do whatever you needed them to do. The gunships that they used in the helicopters, if they could get a call out, literally they'd get helicopters there relatively quick because these patrol units that they would send, the United States military would send out, didn't go. I guess it's in movies and stuff, it's not really shown. They didn't go far from their main base because there was no way to protect them if they went too far.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you went on a 3-day hike. No, you did patrols to try to widen the area you control. So as you moved out and took over land, your camp would get bigger and bigger. Once it got to a certain size, they'd start another. And the idea was to let's move out and take over land. And that's how you would do it. Well, that's what most of these things, when you see in the movie, when they're in these small, battalions and other things to go out, that's typically all they're doing is maybe a mile or two away from their main base. That way, if they radioed in that they needed air support, they'd send out the helicopters with the giant, tracers on them. And the reason why they used tracers in Vietnam is because at night, especially, it gave you a good idea where you're shooting because you didn't want to shoot your own troops.
Yes.
And so you see, that's one of the most notable things when you see Vietnam footage is the tracer rounds. That's because they gave them a more accurate idea of where they were shooting. But they, my father, talked about it, that, he was just bored. That's why he went on land. But
right.
They, Vietnam was just a whole new thing. Like I said, guerrilla warfare was not a term we came up against. When we started facing, and again, sort of subject, Nicaragua, Colombia, the 80s, all of that happening. We faced that type of thing again, but we were more prepared. We understood that when you went out, you needed to check a 360 radius. We were so used to lines in war. You set a line, they set a line, and you started firing at each other. Go back to the Civil War. You set a line, you fire, reload, and as you're reloading, if you can, you would advance. And so, and even, if you think about how warfare has changed, using the Civil War is a really good measure for how war has changed because at night, 90% of the time, you wouldn't fight because you couldn't see. So at night, it was when they dug trenches, when they tried to move forward and start digging so they could gain ground.
Yeah. World War I was the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
When we faced the Viet Cong, they were already entrenched. Like I said, these tunnels were already there. It wasn't like they did them overnight. They were a totally new type of warfare we had never seen before. So as time went on, paranoia and fear took over our command and basically became, I don't care if it's a kid, you kill it. You kill that kid because that kid could be Viet Cong. He could be strapped. And nowadays you think about that, the bombings we have in Iraq and in Kuwait and Afghanistan, we're used to it at our age. At that point in time, they had never come up against that in the amount of it that we were getting.
Yeah.
And you had no way of knowing. Landmines were there. They would set landmines in such not typical spots. So all the trails and stuff in Vietnam were used by, all the populace. It was used by our troops. The only people who didn't use those trails were the Viet Cong, and that's where they would set their landmines and stuff. It was literally right there. And again, they didn't care if it was their own kid that it killed. This is again something we had never come up against. It wasn't about,
except for a little bit in Japan, but yeah,
a little bit. But even in Japan, it wasn't so much that they were willing to sacrifice themselves. Well, let me rephrase that. It was not that we would sacrifice our own children and stuff. They didn't want to do that. If it happened in happenstance, it was a tragic thing, but it was still for the collective good of Japan, is how they
Yeah.
would have thought it. And that
Right.
that child, that woman, that man died for a purpose. In Vietnam, it was the exact opposite. It didn't matter who it killed.
Yeah.
It was designed to kill.
Yeah.
And that was something we never came across, was somebody who didn't care about their own people. And now we call them suicide bombers and things like that. And we got terms for these things now because we finally came across it. And then as time went on, we learned more and more about it. And, but we had never faced that before. And that's probably why, quote unquote, we lost. I mean, people talk about Afghanistan and leaving Afghanistan the way we did. Trump was coming up with a plan to leave Afghanistan. And that plan wasn't necessarily fully used, but a lot of it was used when we left. I mean, a lot of this was already decided upon and moving forward. We didn't have a plan to leave Vietnam. We left with our tails between our legs and we were running. And that's why we left so many people behind, is because we just tried to get out. They airlifted people out of the embassy at the last second because they weren't ready. They again, I mentioned this before we started. Miss Saigon, if you watch that, the ending of it is this helicopter comes down and airlifts people out. That is literally exactly how it happened. The last people from the embassy left, and once we did that, it was done. And I guess we also came across a lot of things we'd never come across before, like Infanta, for instance, an American actress. At one time, most of the people in the United States probably liked her. When Vietnam came along, she went overseas and she was called Hanoi Jane because she supported the Viet Cong, or those fighters over there, and said that we were the wrong party. Now, I'm not going to get over who was right or wrong in the whole thing, but it was very different that we had these people. I mean, my dad came home to people spitting at him.
Yeah.
Because you're a horrible person. And it's like, up until that time, even for Korea, even for Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, the Afghanistan troops that have come back, you've never seen the hatred given to the Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
Literally, they are the ones that are hurt the most from hate. Yes, I mean, there are always going to be those people who don't like the troops because they went overseas and they did this or they did that. But the amount of people, and also the other thing, like for instance, I have an uncle who left for Canada to not get drafted. That was a big problem for my dad when they first met. They buried the hatchet at one point, but my father basically flunked out of college, and knowing with the draft that he was going to be drafted, he went in and had his father sign him up for the Navy. My father spent 3 years, I think, in the Navy, from 66 to 69. 69, he got hurt on a ship and later on became 100% disabled American veteran. All that. He had a drop left foot. Basically, he was trying to lift this hatch up on the ship, and 2 or 3 of the springs that helped offset the near 5,000 pounds popped out, and in order to save his left foot from being chopped off, he threw out 3 spinal discs.
Yeah.
Later on in 1980, they cut the nerves to his left foot, and after that point, he never had feeling in it again. I could have taken a hammer and a nail, nailed it right through his foot, and he wouldn't have felt it. After that, he said he should have just let it take his left foot. And my father had a lot of grudges with the whole situation, but when him and my uncle would talk about it, it was amazing that after everything was said and done, my father's number was never called in the draft. He would never have been drafted. So he could have not gone. And he felt the duty to do it. And then I have an uncle, like I said, who felt the need to run and not get drafted. That was the other problem for the United States, is that it was very divisive. We'd never come across a time when people didn't line up. I mean, remember, World War II, you had Elvis show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
But think about this, and I love Muhammad Ali. I love him to death. I think he's one of the best athletes of our time. But Muhammad Ali lost his world championship of boxing over not wanting to go to this war. I think it was Vietnam he refused to go to. And I had to go double check that, but I'm pretty sure it was Vietnam. He lost his world championship. This is what we're talking about. We had never come across such a divisive no or yes. You were either with the country or you weren't. And I think we're divided right now as a country, but not nearly like that, because it was a whole nother world of, I guess, the people who would sit there and want to be, the activists, what think about the children.
Armchair quarterback.
Yeah, they were saying all this stuff, and people were coming back in body bags and with legs gone, saying, you don't understand. A kid comes up to you and pulls a cord and you're dead. I mean, literally, we as a country here didn't understand what they were going through.
No.
And so
still don't, to some degree.
That's the thing. And again, it is still a very taboo subject. It was very divisive then. It's probably still divisive. Only over the past few, decades have we actually started to look at that and say, well, maybe we were wrong. The Vietnam Wall, for instance, what year did that get? Let's see what year that got founded. Trying to remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up myself.
Well, the other thing too, like the biggest one of the other big problems was the rules of engagement. We could only go so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing.
And we could only engage in certain spots. So as long as they were over that line, they could fire at us, and we couldn't go to them to take the battle. We just couldn't. We couldn't cross that line. The bombers couldn't cross that line.
Well, Vietnam was set much like Korea was set. It was split into two. We were trying to protect the southern half of it, and yes, we were abiding by a rule that we thought was allowed. And they were crossing the line at any point they wanted to, because they didn't care. They didn't care about a Geneva Convention. Again, remember the thousands of POWs that were left that we now know were killed, were tortured, were starved to death. I mean, they're still finding people. I'd have to look that up. But for instance, to give you an idea, 1975 is when the Vietnam War was officially concluded. It wasn't until 1982 that they actually dedicated the wall.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, well, what's the point of this? Now we're in a place where every year there's a traveling version of that wall. There's like 2 or 3, I think, that people have made them. These people travel with it so they can spread this message around that there are people on that wall still to this day that are only on that wall because we don't know if they're alive or if they're dead.
Yeah.
And again, it's POWs. And I mean, again, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, Vietnam is one of those wars that
I'm just saying
that it was. I don't think there's been a war quite like it since.
No.
And I mean, you can draw similarities in certain aspects to certain things that have happened since, but never really has it gotten to the point of Vietnam. As a matter of fact, Bush Sr. is noted, whether it's a good note or a bad note, depends on who you are. At the end of the Gulf War, he made a comment that pissed off some people and made other people very happy. And that comment was, well, that sure made up for Vietnam when they won the Gulf War.
Go ahead.
So, even then, it's still looked back on as, well, we needed to prove ourselves again. And, oh, look, we did this. And, even though if you really think about it, they dropped the ball there too. But they,
Yeah, in a way.
Well, yeah. So, for instance, Vietnam, original missing was 1,973, 90 in Cambodia. And to this date, 729 of those 1,900 have been accounted for. 42 of that 729 were in Cambodia. That leaves 140 or 1,244 still missing, and 48 from Cambodia. So just about 1,300 that were still missing. Now, I'm not trying to get political on your show, but a lot of people have argued to death and raised their concerns with the way we left Afghanistan. The max number I heard left in Afghanistan was upper side of close to 300. I know the government said 100 to 200. I've heard maybe up to 300. Of that, most of those people are either in the process of being allowed back or have made it back. While we didn't leave in the best way in Afghanistan, we absolutely, totally fucked everything up in Vietnam.
Yeah.
We had no clue what we were doing. We didn't have a plan at all, any sort of a plan. And I think even to this day, when you see people raising hell about Afghanistan, how we left and the people left behind there, and I'm not saying that was right or wrong. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this still shows you how out of whack the thought is on Vietnam. We have people who go every year during the good time of the year, not during the monsoon season and not during, and I don't know the exact time. There's like a 3-month time that we send people from the United States out there with the help of guides, and we traipse through Vietnam looking for bones, looking for people who might know or tell stories about where they believe Viet Cong kept American troops. And we're still looking to this day, and we've only found 729 of those people. That's double the highest number I've heard from Afghanistan, who we knew those people were still alive, and we knew where those people were in Afghanistan. I think that tells you the skewed thought on Vietnam. Nobody talks about it even to this day. And there are a lot of people who still, to this day, only think about Vietnam.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that came back from that, I mean, I know that there was suicide rates and stuff like that before Vietnam. Troops came home and they were bothered by those things. And they were just told, you're a man, buck up and deal with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the 70s in Vietnam that you actually started seeing and hearing about all of these people committing suicide. They were homeless. I mean, in the 80s, the beginning of the 80s, Born in the USA, for instance, the song Bruce Springsteen wrote was literally about Vietnam vets who were homeless on the streets. And our government turned a blind eye to them.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how much of a black eye it was. And you think about it, I mean, you go through all the police actions, the wars, whatever. The War of 1812, for instance, we won it technically, but we didn't. It was more the British came back here and said, you know what? Damn you. Why'd you do that? And slapped us around and then left and said, here, you can have your damn country. We don't want it. That's literally what happened. We won some major battles in the 1812, but the only reason why we declared it a victory is they didn't actually take back over. But that was because by that time, the British were like, screw it. We don't want it.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about it like that. We still, in history books, still to this day, we talk about the United States won the War of 1812.
Yeah, and if you're up on this side of the border, we did.
That's what I'm talking about. Because a lot of that happened. We don't, United States, well, it's talked about in history books here and there about how much help we get from the French or the American Indians or the Canadians. We got a lot of help in all of those wars at the beginning because we were these little ragtag little, rascals running around with guns trying to play war. And, the French, the Indians, the Canadians were all kind of like, okay, guys, you point the gun that way.
Well, and a lot of the Canadians were on of course, the British side.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like here in Winnipeg, one of our big folk heroes is the League of Seacourt, who, right or wrong, decided that I did a radio show about it. But yeah, I mean, like, War of 1812 was looked upon as we won and we came home. Or the common joke up here is we ran out of good beer and came home.
But Vietnam is the one that everybody kind of points to because we remember it. Remember, but it is, again, I believe it is the most divisive, the most taboo subject as far as war in the United States is concerned. They just don't talk about it. I mean, no matter what you think about Richard Nixon hated the Vietnam War. He wanted out of it so bad. But we had been in it since Kennedy was here. And so, but I think that led to a lot of what happened with Nixon's presidency, is that he was so worried about what people thought of him because of things like Vietnam and because he couldn't get out of Vietnam and all this stuff. That's kind of what led to his downfall. He himself became very paranoid. Like I said, a lot of what happened in Vietnam is it made America paranoid about a lot of things. Okay, well, I'm going to say something about this. The media all the way around on both sides of the fence has a way of manipulating things. The problem is yes, the beginning of what you would call nowadays the liberal media shed a certain light on Vietnam that was, we want peace in the United States. This is not peace. Look at what we're doing to these people. Instead of showing that the men that we sent over there didn't have a choice. They were put into a position that they didn't have a choice in. And then when they got there, it was either I die or they die. And that's any war. That was what was lost in Vietnam, because you did get a side of things where people were peace, love, and happiness here. The summer of '69, the summer of love, the flower children. You see all of this stuff, and it definitely shone a different light on the war that we hadn't done before. Because before that, World War II, Korea,
it was the first time really it became popular within like the media and those in like show business or that had a voice. It became popular to talk against the government. It became popular to discourage thy military. Before that, I mean, if you tried that in World War II, duck and cover.
Oh, yes.
Well,
because
I was
shitstorm that would come down upon you.
I was going to point out in World War II, we to this day talk about propaganda video from the Nazis. Propaganda video. What the United States did with our people was propaganda. It was very much your men in uniform. Look at them. They showed these beautiful parades in overseas. And what's funny is we didn't actually officially enter World War II until Pearl Harbor. We were only there again as support. United States has this long running support feature about it.
World War I was for propaganda for World War II. Sorry to cut in, but
go ahead.
The propaganda, the biggest propaganda, one of the bigger propaganda pieces of World War II was Wake Island, because as these troops, American soldiers and American civilians, are being captured and put in internment camps by the Japanese, they're selling war bonds on how the heroes of Wake Island defeated the Japanese.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So they're the spin back home, they were still selling war bonds on the backs of these men that are now in prison camps. But that wasn't the narrative at the time. And we don't really talk about that, but at the same time, the differences is so much, because World War II, to speak ill of the government or the military, you were on very thin ice.
It was the first,
and then
said,
fast
Vietnam
forward
was the first war where we kind of just abandoned that thought of rally behind your troops. Listen, World War II would not have been a victory if we hadn't have believed in the troops or what we were doing. Men left to go to war. Women went to the factories and made shells and artillery. They were building the tanks here. Women were. Why?
Yep.
Not because they had to. It was because they wanted to. They knew that every tank, every round, and it was our propaganda said it. If you don't do this, then your man might not come home. And they didn't want that to happen. The opposite happened in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Why are we there?
It became popular to disparage against the government. It became popular to discourage against your troops.
Mm-hmm.
It became popular to take up for the other side. It became popular to shun nationalism thinking. It became popular to put down what your military soldier is doing. It also became the first time that the difference between military and government was no longer there, because it used to be that even if you disagreed with the government, even if you disagreed with Truman dropping the bomb, you would never say a disparaging remark against the men and women in uniform.
No, because they didn't have a choice.
Oh.
That's right. Come Vietnam, that line went away.
Yep.
And it's never really returned.
No,
it has to a degree, but it's not World War II level.
No, I mean, if you think about it, you go to Iraqi Freedom, Desert Storm. Everybody watched it live on TV, and they were still supporting those troops that went over there. And now there were dissenters. There were people who didn't like that we were over there. Even Afghanistan. Think about it. We went because 9/11. I mean, we eventually made it.
Right.
We didn't go after Afghanistan immediately. We went after Iraq first again. Why? I don't know, but whatever. But we were all behind it again because, hey, rah rah America, and it was like that again. I mean, maybe not in the massive quantities that you got during World War II,
yeah.
but you still had mostly that. I would say, even if it was only 70-30 or 60-40.
But
even,
that 30, to my point, that 30 wouldn't exist.
No, the thing is, Vietnam was probably a 20% for, 80% against. It was, or at least, again, and yes, this goes back to the whole media side of it. Media didn't let off of this is wrong. We shouldn't be there. This is protests. Again, there was a lot of things. It very reminiscent of what we're going through now. I mean,
to a degree, yeah.
With the race wars, with the flower children, the Vietnam bad, a lot of that, a lot of people blaming the administration. I mean, again, I think presidents, and I lump them all together, they get blamed for a lot more than they actually have control of.
Yes, they do.
It's always interesting that, people want to blame the president for something when really we need to be looking at the other side of it, which is Congress. Congress is where the trouble always starts.
Yeah.
And, so we're kind of more in that. I guess I would call this time right now like a Vietnam light. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who grew up in the race wars, who grew up during that time. My grandfather, my uncle, my dad, all of them. I don't think to this day still, if troops came back home, which they have, but we didn't throw eggs
No.
at Afghanistan veterans. We didn't. We did the Vietnam veterans. So we're not even there. And I know a lot of people think this is a crazy time and things are horrible, but we're nowhere near what we were in the 60s and 70s. That we're not doing that still. We still have this somewhat reverence, right or wrong. We didn't agree with you being over there, but we're glad you're back.
Yeah, it has swung. It has swung back.
And that's what's weird. It's the only war you can absolutely point to where people hated the troops coming back was Vietnam. You didn't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, Vietnam is the anomaly where it was a perfect shitstorm is the easiest way to put it. But I want to thank Chris for joining us. I'm going to give him a chance to promote his various channels and various awares, and then we're going to cut and run as topic of the today.
Yeah. First off, Professor, you put that in, Jeff. Very good. I do want you guys to make sure you support Robert and all the stuff he has going on. I don't know how much you let out there. You've let me know some stuff, and I'm just glad you're on the air. I'm glad you're doing stuff still. We're all there behind you.
And he's doing a great job with it.
Yeah. So, but I'm really glad that you're still doing the shows. You're still out there fighting through all of it, and don't stop, man. You're a great example to a lot of people. I'm glad to hear that. But I want to say that first, and thank you for having me on, guys. Main channel is Real Review 3000. I have another channel called Chaos Central. Chaos Central kind of has taken over more of the pop culture side of stuff for me. I run that channel, but we have two other guys that work with me on. We have 3 shows: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Monday is the Chaotic Conversation tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow's the Chaos List at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and Wednesday night is my show. We wrap up the week with called The Rule of 3, which is at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I also do something about the Masked Singer. If you ever watch The Masked Singer, I do something called Unmasking the Masked Singer, where we talk about who we think's behind the mask. And right now, I think we've got everybody lined up who we think it is. We're probably not going to change our mind, but we're talking more about who do we think is going to get voted off. A couple weeks ago, it was Honey Boo Boo and her mom, Mama June. God, I don't think I've ever heard a worse performance on a singing competition in my life. Horrible. And I literally was like, I've heard bad singers on this show, and I'm like, I don't think I've ever. I've done karaoke in bars, and I don't think I've ever heard anybody that bad. Oh, that's how bad it was. And I would tell you guys to go watch it, but I don't want you to hate me forever. Anyways, so I do that. I do gaming streams on my channel. Next week on Thursday on Chaos Central, we'll be talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife. I'm going to go see it Thursday at 5 p.m. And so around 8 or 9, I don't know yet, around 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern time, probably, we will be going live with a discussion about what we thought about that. I don't know if it'll be spoiler yet or not. But other than that, I just got done doing the
very cool
the Rumble. We just got done with the championship for the Rumble, so I'm kind of taking a step back and doing as little as possible. We're going to be retooling that show, probably starting back up next year. And I'm starting another thing, which is a discussion stream, a one-on-one interview, which is called The Gospel According to Chris. So we're going to start that back up here soon. And I'd love to have both of you guys on sometime if you guys want to come on as a team, or if you want to come on separate. I don't care. I do either or. But basically what we do is we talk similar to what we do here, which is not necessarily history, but it's stuff that the people who come on are passionate about. I call it The Gospel According to Chris as a play on words because it has nothing to do about anything I want to do. It's about what the guest wants. So that's a neat concept. So, but again, thank you guys for having me on.
Anytime.
Thank you for coming on.
And just a quick thing, couple quick scheduling notes. So this Friday we will have Mr. CCDB on again for another, hopefully, as long as his health holds out, we'll have another Mr. CCTV where he talks about his military career. It's very important to both of us that we document as much as we can while Mr. CCTV can still recall. So we're going to get as much of that out as we can. Also, this week, I'm crossing my fingers, toes, and everything else that I get the radio show out this week. Just waiting on a couple more audios, and then we'll get that thing edited and out for you guys to do. It'll be on Dunkirk, and then the one in December will be on Midway. That'll be a
Looking forward to
huge
that one.
undertaking. I still am dreading writing that script. Also, quick little things about Rambling Canuck. I will have the What If series this week. I will have with Han Star, who Chris knows very well. And I will have the What If series this week. Also, Thursday, there will be a live stream on Rambling Canuck with my love, Mrs. Canuck. We'll be doing some Minecraft, and we're going to be doing some survival mode. So this should be entertaining to see how many times I die.
Love is YouTube is not the place for love.
Yeah, well, eat it.
He's bucking the trend.
And then, of course, karaoke Saturday night. It should be very entertaining. Mary will be coming off of a 24-hour live stream. Speaking of which, my love Mary will have on her channel starting this Friday on the 19th. She will have her 24-hour live for the children. It'll be starting on Friday, carrying over till Saturday. And then I believe she's planning on doing all the giveaways right after the fact. And then we will be doing karaoke. So it'll be 24-hour live stream straight into karaoke. So it will be entertaining.
Good luck, Mrs. Canuck.
That's what I say.
Last I checked, I think she's about halfway to her goal, right?
Well, no,
Or a little
we
over?
blew that sucker right out the
did you
window.
now?
She
Okay.
is past her goal now and working on the
Yes.
second goal.
So what happens now? Because I'm trying to remember.
Okay, so now in January, Mark the Infinitely Tired will be bald. Mark the Infinitely Tired.
Yep. Does he have to change his Twitter handle to that?
Well, I'm thinking of trying to talk him into Mr. Fester, but I don't think he'll go for that. But
Interesting. Yes.
Uncle
No.
Fester Mark. We still got to put a light bulb in and see if it lights up. But anyway, he's going to kill me for that. But anyway, and then basically basic regular programming. Next week, we'll be back here for our live stream, I believe at the same time, 11 o'clock next Monday.
Should be 11 a.m. Yes.
So it
Mountains
should be 11
Elysium.
a.m.
One other thing you
Who's
brought
in
up
our
on
chat
Star.
right now?
You brought up Pawn Star. Starting this next Sunday, we're going to be starting back up the trials for Name That Tune. Anybody who watches this channel or Rambling Canucks channel or anybody else's channel in this group, we are doing tryouts. If you want to try out for Name That Tune, we suggest that you have a wired connection. If you do not, make sure you have a very strong Wi-Fi connection. But you don't need to worry about knowing a ton about music. We're just there for fun. So just come and try out. It's no pressure or whatever. But this next week will be a full run through with 4 or 5 people. So try to watch that and you can kind of see how it goes. But after that, we'll go back to just kind of weaning people into it. And we're trying to get more people, new people, anybody here who might like to do that. Please do come on.
All right. Awesome. And with that, sorry, go ahead. Jack.
I want to shout out A Question of Trek on Sunday.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Continuum Trek's channel. We'll be doing another live show this coming Sunday, 4:30 Eastern. Would love to have you there.
Yes, and Question of Trek makes a star appearance in the next radio show.
Yes, he does. So stay tuned for that.
All right. And with that, as my late co-host would always say, thank you and good night.